So I'm Cilla McKay. With my lovely colleagues Andrew and Charlotte, we'll just be jointly facilitating the session today. I run a transformational change consultancy called Oxbow. Been in the transformation change world for more years than I care to remember, 25 years plus. I would never say I'm anywhere near an expert in the way that Andrew and maybe Charlotte are in the AI world, but what I am absolutely leading on at the moment is the conversations that are having in organizations about the change that AI is going to bring. So that's my context. Charlotte, do you want to do likewise?
Lovely. Thank you, Cilla. Good morning, everybody. My name's Charlotte. I run two organisations, Elmer, which focuses on executive coaching and leadership development, and another organisation called the Business Coach Directory that supports coaches and consultants, particularly through building of community and innovation specifically. I'm of great interest today. I'm a bit of a secret techie, not as techie as Andrew, I don't think, but I really have brought AI into both of my businesses, specifically around the development of learning and development content and how to bring that through technological platforms, which I'll talk a little bit about in some of my use case moving forward as well. So lovely to meet you all and some new faces today as well.
Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you. Andrew Gaule. I've been 25 plus years working with companies in how tech is going to change their business models. So, been through the dot-com waves, the electric vehicle waves, the rise of China, sustainability, and this wave of generative AI when that came to the fore 2.5 years ago. I got deeply involved in that within it, and now working with companies on how it's going to transform their business models in lots of circumstances. So, looking forward to giving some examples of those and discussing those today.
Thank you, Andrew. So we are going to now share the screen with some slides that we're going to share today, and these will be made available to you, including all of the summary notes after today as well. And this is the second in our series of webinars that we've been running just to engage with a bit of a journey around the content. In our first webinar in June, we looked at specifically around the understanding of AI and its impact, and really had some great insight from everybody engaged in the conversation around understanding AI, what it is and what it isn't, really going back to foundations. And then we talked a bit about how we aligned AI with strategy, from curiosity to clarity. Andrew took us through some productivity and creativity around the introduction of AI in practice. And then we started to look at the levers for change and transformation, where IE is essentially part of the future focus for organizations too. And we ended up in that conversation with a bit about storytelling and how we start to create our change narratives. And that's where we're going to begin the journey today, in connecting back to the conversations we had there. So those of you who are new to our dialogue, really happy to make those earlier summary notes available to you as well. And we're going to talk a bit more about the master change storytelling today, and by telling a few examples and stories of where we have really seen AI making a significant change to and alignment with an organizational story for change. We're then going to talk a bit more around defining AI's strategic intent. And this is where Andrew is going to bring some additional thinking into what AI is can do to solve real business challenges. I'm going to then hand to Charlotte later on in our session to talk about creating leadership excellence and the leadership traits and culture needed for AI success. And then we will just open up the conversation to look at the application of the learning to really see what your thoughts and what your experiences have been as well. So that's our journey for today, but it's all focused around the three essential leadership pillars that have gone through both the previous webinars that we have delivered and also what we intend to do in our third session in September as well, which is about leadership vision, human-centered transformation and technical enablement. So with that in mind, we started our storytelling by giving some really interesting examples here. I'm not going to necessarily go into the detail of these ones today because they're in our previous notes, because I'm going to ask Andrew and Charlotte and Andrew in that order to just talk about a user case study in a moment before we get into the detail of what those stories might look like for any organization going through transformational change. But it's worth looking up, and we can share some of the stories that come from clinical science, from Amazon, from Delta, from financial services, and sectors that you may not expect necessarily to engage in AI at all. It's interesting, we talked about the chemical industry too, and what that might mean from a story perspective. So if we go to our next slide, then just going to hand to Charlotte just to give us an example. I'm going to talk a little bit about financial microscope in a moment, but Charlotte, do you want to start us off with your story?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually going to start with a story, and I'm going to look inward at my own businesses of how I've started to think about AI with regards to the development of how to bring content to market, specifically around AI and broader learning and development. So if you think about the current climate, and I'm sure lots of you have seen it on LinkedIn, sadly, look, there's quite a lot of vacancies of people, sadly, people being made redundant in the learning and development space at the moment. So the problem that a lot of organizations are facing at the moment is bottom line, and they're thinking about where are we going to take some cost out of our businesses. And unfortunately, not my agreement, a lot of our organizations choose to look at learning and development as one of their first areas to remove from the P&L. The reason why I'm positioning it like this is actually potentially the reason for this is actually because organizations are starting to look at how they use AI to use and develop their content. Now, from my organization perspective, I've used AI to help myself build a new online academy, to build a website available for it, but also using AI to help develop the content. Now, you might think, well, how do you do that? I use supporting tools. The platform I'm talking about here is called Learn Worlds, but that very much then interfaces into other content development platforms, specifically called in Perplexity in this environment. This platform itself is kind of like an aggregator tool. It then brings in all the different types of AI platforms to then help develop visual, help package into PDFs, ebooks, with regards to actually bringing this content to life. The difference here is actually you need to know what you want to put into that content. You can't just write, for example, let's take Nadine, as you spoke briefly about you're in the academic space. You couldn't write, just develop me an AI program to train my individual. You really need to start thinking about how you prompt. And this is where the human interaction of what we know as experts and all the years of experience with regards to bringing to life how we do this. And this is how I've used all my knowledge and my acumen and my ability to learn how to prompt to help me to develop content that I can then deliver as me as the individual, the human side of it, and everything about how I deliver content. But to speed up, instead of having lots of time designing content without any support, I can now use AI to bring this to life, not only for my own business, but we've also done this for other organizations now as well, where they're learning of how to actually do it themselves to reduce their capital cost of actually employing people, but now actually partnering with organizations like mine and others to actually bring it as an operating cost of actually bringing this to life for them. So that's just to give you a bit of a snapshot of how I'm starting to use this within my own businesses and partners as well.
Thank you, Charlotte. Andrew, do you want to share too for us?
Yeah, sure. So over the last 2 years, I've been working around using AI and using an example about making investment decisions. So I'm a founding member of Henley Business Angels, and with Dennis, who's on the call and that today, we've been working with that angel group to use AI to review pitch decks and applications and that from entrepreneurs, help them to enhance that their offerings, do competitor analysis, do market research using AI, and to create powerful outputs. So in the last 3 or 4 days, there's been half a dozen entrepreneurs that I've been interacting with as part of the next investment pitch round. In the examples I'm going to be giving today as well around audio interaction and video interaction, we've trialed those AI audio and video interactions to be able to interview entrepreneurs and that as well, and to enhance their offering. So instead of typing, which you might do about 20 words a minute, you can probably speak about 120 words a minute, and the interaction is richer. and more powerful than that to help improve the process. And at the end of my presentation today, I'll be giving an example where we believe AI now can radically change the business model for investment from doing a number of large investments into a small number of firms to investing in a lot more businesses to change the business model. And I'm a big believer that AI helps to change the business model and augment people rather than necessarily replacing them. So that I think is the power and the potential of AI, which we'll demonstrate in the previous and in today's session.
Thank you, Andrew. And the one that I'd like to bring to the table for just a short overview today is the partnership that my consultancy business Oxbow has with Financial Microscope. Some of you may have come across Financial Microscope before, but for this is a really interesting, especially within the context that Andrew and Dennis work in around investment as well, looking at investment cases, because one of the things that we do in Oxbow is we look at 9 key areas of organisational health to identify future sustainability and health in organisations. But that's based upon the current and often the past data that we can gather around such things as leadership, alignment, direction, processes, ways of working, and also including such elements as internal and external engagement in organisation to see how sustainable they are with performance over time. The investment within Financial Microscope has brought something very exciting through AI. This is 10 years in the development stage. It's predictive AI. Andrew will tell us a lot more about what the difference is with those things when we come to talk about tools a little bit later on. But in terms of predictive AI, it's worked on aligning thousands of data points, an algorithm that sits in terms of the interrogation of those data points from organizational published accounts. These are accounts that you could quite easily get from Companies House, potentially an organization that is at least 20 million perhaps turnover would be typical for this, but also for organizations who are looking either to invest or with private equity, this is a piece of gold dust because fundamentally based upon 3 year sets of accounts, the algorithms and with predictive AI have identified an over 90% success rate in looking at financial future sustainability. So rather than looking at what has happened in the past, the Financial Microscope tool provides a sustainability index that clearly identifies not only the level of sustainability based on those 3 year sets of accounts, but also what the key areas for risk are and the areas of mitigation. And of course, it's never about the numbers. It's often about leadership. It's often about skills. It's about organizational structure and setup and ways of working as well. But those two things powerfully aligned with what we might call some of the more traditional ways of looking at organizational health. It's produced a real game changer in the way that we can identify future activity. And I have aligned that with a journey with one of my clients over 3 years, just to see whether if I had had those accounts 3 years ago when I started on that journey, we could have made some different choices. And it was incredible in terms of the accuracy of predicting what actually happened in that organization over 3 years. So more to share on that at some point in the future. But on the basis that that leads us now nicely into the importance of aligning AI in our transformational journey, I wanted to recap for those of you who've been on the call before, you'll have seen this model. For those of you who are new, this is what we use within our Oxbow world, and Charlotte and Andrew are now very familiar with this as well, to ensure that we align our AI transformation with organizational transformation with our purpose and story at the heart. So what is the story that we want to tell? What do we want people to experience? What's our intent and ambition? How are we going to align the behaviors? And what do we want people to experience differently? And I'm not going to go necessarily through the detail of this particular model today, but one of the most important things that we're going to do is to start to change the organizational conversations about AI. And I think it'd be fair to say, Andrew and Charlotte, in all our experiences running webinars, some of the most regular feedback that we have are around trust that we get, around ethics, and also about stakeholder engagement. And those two things require us to have different internal conversations in terms of our transformational journey. It's not just a question of saying, yeah, but it'll all come good in the end and everybody's doing this. That might be over exaggerating to make a point. Our ability to build real trust around how we're going to use AI is an essential part of changing our organizational conversation about AI. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes now before I hand to Andrew, who's going to take us through the tools, just talking about how do we do some of that. And those of you involved in setting up, leading, working within organizations in terms of vision, mission and values will recognize some of this. It's not new, but it's such an important key area in terms of having that clarity of our story and our vision for the future around what AI is going to do and what it's not going to do, as we covered in our last webinar. Our mission being the roadmap to get there, and the purpose of the feeling that everyone will have when you accomplish what you set out to do. And supporting that is also the values and the culture that we want to align with and create. Now, it'd be fair to say that most of you on this call will either be working with or in an organisation that will have a set of values and cultures that exist currently. But if that what one of those core values, which it often is around trust and integrity, then how do we maintain that with a backdrop, with a tool where there might be skepticism or suspicion as well? So I'm just sharing a really quick trust equation here, and the notes on this can come out to support this. But if we're going to ensure that we really build trusted relationships in setting the scene for AI, then this little equation is a useful one just to remind us around how we build trust around these new future-focused tools and the transformational journey that we're going to be on. The C stands for credibility. How credible are the tools? How are we going to ensure that they're going to deliver what they say they're going to do? User case studies are absolutely the way that we start to build credibility. And then reliability. I know many individuals have spoken about using ChatGPT and then asking a slightly different question and getting a completely different set of outcomes from that. So how reliable, how much do we need to ensure that we really place that human-centric focus on looking at the responses and using, as Andrew often reminds us, as a really trusted assistant rather than being gospel. And then the I stands for intimacy. That seems to be an unusual one in this context, but it's absolutely around ensuring that we understand fully the business and the context in which we're using that. Professional understanding over against S, which is about self-orientation. So whose agenda is this? Are we driving AI to align completely with the organization's visions and values? Or what other agendas are there? Is it simply to make my life easier? So I'm going to leave it there on the trust equation, but it's then important to understand which of the stakeholders in your organization you need to leverage. Particularly, we want to identify those where their influence is high and their interest is high, and how we need to make sure if we're involved in influencing that change that we get them engaged and confirm their attention, particularly also those where their influence is high, but their interest is low. How do we bring the stories to bear and ensure that we have got the right people engaged in the right activity to support the transformation journey that we're on? So, yeah, I will add that, Andy, into the notes in a moment. So I'm going to hand to Andrew now, who's going to give us again some real great insight into how these tools can be used.
Great, thank you, Cilla. So what I'm going to be covering today is looking at audio customer interaction, how we could start thinking about how videos and avatars could be working into the future, and how AI can be being used as an augmented sort of worker. As we said, we've covered in the previous June session really about text and images, and there's the video and notes available for that. And in the future session in September, I'm going to be covering more about how agents and robots are going to be taking things forward. So really, this is a journey on how I think the AI tools are developing and how we're going to bring them into our business and how we're going to engage team members to start using these powerful things. And I touched this on in more detail in our previous session, but I wanted to recap it really, because I think organizations that I've seen over the last 2+ years, plus my years of working with companies around how business is changing, you need to understand first the understanding of the AI and its capabilities. So just like we went through the dot-com era in the 90s, people didn't understand what this internet thing was and how it was going to impact when mobile phones came around and we were doing all our transactions online. We've got the same thing now that people don't understand what AI is doing. Now we're seeing people starting to use chatbots and GPT, but they're not really seeing it within their current processes. So reviewing an organization's processes, thinking about how they use AI as an assistant for you and your colleagues is where I think quite a number of organizations are now getting to. But they then need to think about how these are going to change enterprise processes and going to use secure data on an AI platform. And we'll cover that a bit more in our sort of September analysis. But I think it's really important for companies and senior leaders now to start thinking about this is going to be transformational. And I'll be giving some examples of operations and investment as we talk through today. So we are on a journey using white collar examples of professional investment people, experts, consultants, medical sort of players. A lot of those have been driven by people and that within the past. And we're now using IT to support those things. You know, we've got online booking services, we've got internet booking sort of services. But what I'm going to be talking about is what happens when we've got the AI be managing the data, managing the interactions between AI systems and humans, or when we get to the situation of AI systems talking to other AI systems, which become more powerful. So it's really these sort of three horizons that are going to be changing. And I put those in my book, which I published about 7 years ago, which you can sort of see there and follow up on that with on these QR codes that I'm going through. So the first example I want to give is using AI as a call center GPT sort of type audio interaction. And we've had some, call answering services when, hello, welcome to my company, press 1 to go to such and such, press 2 to go to something else. The AI systems now are becoming a lot more powerful. And really, the key point that I'd like to make is I'm not advocating, and we're not saying that AI is the almighty, but is it better than the alternative? So in this example of answering phone calls, the availability of your AI system can be 24/7 and can be an instant response. So after 2 rings of the phone will be answered. You won't be going into a call holding system saying you're number 20 in the queue. And then when you get through to the human, that they're slow, they haven't got access to your data. So we're seeing now AI systems being deployed in organizations I'm working with in clinical environments where you're booking your appointments, you're getting information about your particular interaction because the AI can interact with you on your in the customer management sort of systems. The empathy and the personal touch is a bit limited at the moment on the AI, but one client I'm working with, we were suggesting to them that now when you know the phone number of the organization, in the organization, you can now be using AI with regional accents. So for the relevant part of the UK or part of the world, or the language relevant for the customer, rather than having to deal with accents of people in your call centers, which could be in the UK, could be in South Africa, could be in India, etc. And you've got consistent responses from the AI system because they have the knowledge of the regulations and they have the knowledge of the information and that from your sort of systems. So really, I'm not saying that AI is almighty yet, but are they better than the alternative of not having your customer service running at the particular time of the day or for particular customers in the regions that you're sort of dealing with? So let's try and give an example here when my system moves. So here's an example of an interaction with audio.
Hi, Andrew. Great to hear from you again. Last time we chatted, you were exploring how AI audio interfaces could transform customer service and real-time data updates. Always love your practical approach to innovation. What's on your mind today?
Can you hear this okay, Sal?
Yeah, I'd like to explore an example of that with you. So if a customer comes in, wants to make an appointment or wants to check if products are available, how would the AI interface to the customer information?
Love that scenario, Andrew. If a customer calls in to book an appointment or check product availability, the AI could greet them, ask for their details, and then securely access the booking or inventory system to provide real-time answers or schedule a slot. And what kind of system are you currently using for appointments or inventory? Do you have a CRM or booking tool in place already?
Yeah, there are some in place, but it's a bit disjointed. But I'm really interested in how the AI then can update the customer information.
Great question, Andrew. The AI can act as a bridge, pulling customer info from different systems by using secure APIs. So it recognizes returning customers, updates records.
So that example there is me interacting with Bawdy, which I've often used in these demonstrations rather than using sort of live systems. So Bawdy's a audio AI system. It started with its linking in on LinkedIn. And here I'm giving the example of me having a chat with it about pretty unstructured sort of content. Now, of course, you would train your AI assistant for your particular profession, so physiotherapy, and knowing the customer information from your CRM sort of type systems. And in this example, immediately after that phone call I had with Bawdy, he sent me a text message reconfirming what we've just sort of talked about. So this becomes now a really powerful audio. So in this example, we're using an avatar. So we've taken the next sort of step and that here. So let me just briefly show you this example. And you'll be able to look at these in more detail.
I'm excited to announce a new venture focused on realizing AI's massive potential. Businesses today face immense opportunity, yet many feel unsure how to capitalize on AI. Our experienced team guides organizations to transform with AI. We rapidly prototype to demonstrate AI's.
So that example is my avatar. So it took about 2 minutes of video and audio interaction for me to train. In this example, it's a HeyGen system to speak my words, and the words that I was actually speaking were generated from an AI text. And we've used this sort of example in the investment platform that Dennis and I've worked on to be able to analyze a pitch deck and then use an avatar to interview the entrepreneur. So in real time, the interaction is happening, and that between the person who's applying for investment with us asking questions that have come from the analysis that the AI has done. I'm not, to me, this is almost like a nice little gimmick in that at the moment, because the audio I think is good enough without having to have the video. But the potential of these things are becoming more powerful. I'm not going to look at this one in more detail because I showed this in the previous session. But in this example, when you go and look at this on LinkedIn, you will see I was translating my English, me as the human speaking, to then having it fully translated into Spanish. And this was a really powerful and good example. And I've shown this to natural Spanish speakers, and they were so impressed by that transition. And I think the use case here, an example would be that if you want to provide customer service or sales to your customers globally, you can now tailor your content and your access using AI for audio or video to suit what meets your particular customer needs. And in this example, we've got me asking.
Hi, I'm Nick, the Hagen avatar, and I'm excited to introduce you to Andrew Gaule, the founder and chief AI officer of Amava, a leading consulting firm. Andrew has over 20 years of experience advising global enterprises on how to leverage emerging technologies like AI to drive innovation, productivity, and transformative change. So in that example, I provided some of the content about my website, about me, my LinkedIn, and that to an AI system, Perplexity, and that created the text that the avatar then for the profile that I wanted, male, white, outdoor environment, for it then to provide that avatar introduction. And this last example I'd like to give is giving the AI just the URL of my book, and then saying that I wanted it to be a female, what professional tone I wanted.
Evolving world, especially with the coming AI wave, staying ahead is crucial for businesses. Don't miss out on opportunities or risk being disrupted. Embrace the power of innovative new value chains with purpose to perform. This groundbreaking book by Andrew Gaule offers a framework for long-term investment strategies, from nurturing innovative ideas.
So that example there, from just providing the URL of the product and saying what profile of customer we were aiming it at, it created the text, created the image, and created that video. So if you have got thousands of products, then the AI systems now can create these quality marketing avatars and videos, which would have taken a considerable amount more time to generate those and get actors and create the scripts and that sort of within the past. So here you've got use cases now, which for different customers, different generations and all that are being used very powerfully, and TikTok videos, etc., are being created automatically by AI. So for me, and this was from my book from about 7 years ago, when technology disrupts a value chain, you really need to think about what's your product or service, what's the new finance model, so how are you going to sell, how are you going to earn income, and what margins you're going to make from those by bringing these things together. And now with AI being able to generate new content, being able to generate marketing, being able to provide these products and services at a considerably lower cost, how is that going to change the value chain for your industry and for your sort of sector? And then I touched on at the beginning the use case example story about how AI now could transform the investment decision making. So we can automate due diligence, improves the accuracy, and reduce considerably the manual workload. AI can screen starters, provide higher potential quickly. It can gather more insights with interviews rather than multiple people spending hours doing interviews. The AI can do that more effectively. And as I said, it could change the business model by having a more diversified, broader portfolio. Instead of doing one large investment, you could do multiple investments powered by AI. So recommend go and have a look at that article and think about how these new audio, video, AI applications could now change your sort of business, and in providing educational content and providing tailored content, and that in learning and that, for example. So very happy to follow up with questions on that later.
Thank you, Andrew. As usual, completely blows me away. Look at some of these things. I'm never cease to be amazed. So, but I'm going to hand to Charlotte now to look at the leadership context and climate for AI success. So over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Cilla, and hi again, everybody. I think it's fascinating, all this. I've just listened with so much curiosity to Andrew's presentation and written down some notes of things that I haven't even thought about myself yet with regards to how to use some agents for decision making around some of the coaches that we know, for example, and recommendations to organisations. So lots I'm thinking about. However, there is a bit of a however to this, and that's people, the human element associated to all of this. And over the weekend, I read an article it was in The Economist, it popped up on my Apple News. The article was called "Why is AI so slow to spread?" I think it came out Sunday, if I recall correctly, Saturday or Sunday. And I've actually brought some of the thinking of this content into today's topic that I'm talking about, because the stats that are positioned here are from the US, but they are thematic with regards to how this is starting to roll out across the world. There's so much executive enthusiasm now with regards to how AI should be spoken about at a strategic level, which we've spoken about in some of our previous webinars. But actually, what we're starting to have available to us is the reality check of the data with regards to actually how many organizations are using AI meaningfully. It's pretty common, I would say now, from all the organizations we work with as a collective here, that AI is on the boardroom table. It's been discussed. But actually, from a meaningful point of view, what's really happening? And when I mean meaningfully, I'm talking about that it's embedded in the strategic intent and the ambition and the outcomes organizations are looking to achieve. Through some work that I've been doing along with Cilla on this call, we have data ourselves now through the use of diagnostic tools and surveys that we've identified that AI is being used in organizations, but it's very much at the point of users' own decision of what they're using with regards to their own platform. So they might be using ChatGPT to help them do this, or they might be using Claude to help them to do this, or Canva to help them to develop an image here. That is not what would be classed as meaningfully. It's about actually trial and test. It's been used about the own personal ambition of trying to skill up with regards to this. So what we're starting to ascertain, and the article I referenced to, and actually from practice of being within organisations, is that although these conversations are happening at an executive level, we're starting to see that the middle managers are really starting to hold the power of what's starting to happen day to day. And this is really the kind of what we call bridging this leadership gap, but from an adoption perspective. And you can read some of the common failure points and why this might be, specifically cultural initiatives. Cultural change isn't there between what's been discussed at the boardroom table to what actually happens in practice. People are concerned about actually, is this compliant? Are we allowed to do this from an ethical standpoint? But then we start to really get on to like the real human element, and I'll class this actually with regards to what does this actually mean to me? So this is where we start to get the irony between actually how automation and technology can enable organizations, but fundamentally it's now where people are starting to stand in the way because they're questioning actually what does this mean for me, and has this actually been discussed? So you think about the examples that Andrews has given, albeit they're brilliant and they can start to really help organizations move forward. Fundamentally, there will be a human element needs to be considered here, and a strategy that needs to be developed with, if we're going to place this into our organization, what do we need to do? And this is really then starts to talk about the culture and the mindset organizations need to have, both for their current and their future leaders. So what we've identified is starting to look at the profile of individuals, and we've looked at the future skills that are required by 2030 to really think about what are the types of things that individuals and employees and organisations need to demonstrate for now and into the future, looking ahead to 2030. So you might hear we all need to have a transformative mind, we need to have transformational leadership. But actually the words that we start to use now is about this ability to be adaptable and operate in the grey, as I would call it if I was working with somebody individually. How do we embrace this uncertainty of not knowing what the future might look like for me individually, while also understanding and skilling myself up on future tech and platforms? So this kind of mindset towards continual learning. To do this, we need to think about, we need to lead with evidence. So it's not only about what our gut instinct might tell us, which we very much think about from a feeling preference. It's actually we need to live with an evidence-based thinking preference with regards to really backing up our decision making around this is what we might do based on the evidence and the things we know so far. But then we layer it with regards to, actually, I think this is the best thing to do based on my human experience and my intuition from the things that I've done in the past. So you're really a bit of a conundrum here of actually you're having to challenge yourself based on what you might have thought is right, based on previous experience, versus what the new future state might look like as well. The ethical part is very much down to individuals' moral compass. And everybody's moral compass will be fundamentally different with regards to how they balance individual innovation and their own thinking with regards to the responsibility of how to execute in the future. So this is something we help leaders think about. Actually, how do you think about AI? What might get in the way from you, for you if you want to implement this? Potentially individuals are risk averse. They don't like the thought of it. It's not ethical for me to believe that. How do we help individuals see a different way of thinking with regards to that for the future as well? And then we think about actually what does this profile look like with regards to how we actually have to execute? What are the kind of skills? So the ability to be highly collaborative, engaging with others, the ability to manage stakeholders across the organization and bring them on the journey. They can navigate cross-functionally with teams, particularly organizations that already operate highly matrix environments will win quicker here rather than organizations potentially that operate very siloed mentalities. And one of the ways that we work and talk with organisations about how to that is actually developing a small like change champion teams and individuals that demonstrate those change characteristics. So we help organisations really understand who are those positive innovators, let's call them that can really spirit and create this vision of what the future state could look like, which is a skill in itself. Not everybody can do that, and not everybody wants to do that as well. So for us to actually allow these things to happen, these are just not nice to have anymore. These are things that we need to think about. How do we help organizations identify the individuals that might have this mindsets already to those that might be more challenged? And this is where I bring in some of the work and the thinking from Carol Dweck. Some of you might be familiar of her fixed and growth mindset already. But what we thought about with regards to the world of AI is actually how do we bring fixed and growth mindset into the world of AI to help organizations transform now and in the future? And some of this terminology, you can read it for yourself. But what we think about from when we're working with leaders is we need to help them identify themselves. They can't be told necessarily. They need to take the self-awareness and self-management of actually, this is actually how I'm thinking about this. Let's use an example of, okay, I'm going to try Claude, for example, to help me to do something. But what if it's not right? What if I get it wrong? What if I ask it the wrong type of question? So really challenging that mindset to move from a fixed view potentially to more of a let me experiment, let me see what it can do for me, and then let's discuss it back into that more collaborative problem-solving way of being. And this is how we help individuals and wider teams and organizations transform, moving from it's always been done this way to more of a this is what the future state could look for us. However, all of this is based about human behavior and really thinking about individual psychological preferences. But beyond the thinking of this innovation of culture, we now need to really consider actually what are the risks associated to doing this as well. So one of the areas I speak to many organisations about is actually thinking about how do you think about AI risks and how do you address these now and in the future. My next slide will really shows about what this might look like for organisations. And the ones that, and I'm going to use some examples I find when I'm working with leaders at a coaching level or within teams, is this one area, and it really sits under personal risks I'm going to talk about specifically at the moment is this cheating? What happens if I get found out? I've heard in numerous conversations with people that people feel that they're cheating. And this is why risk and culture very much sit together. And the culture that we create that allows this active experimentation and our human individuals to feel that they're psychologically safe to say, I've used AI to help me do this. It's a really interesting conundrum. I'm starting to recognise in organisations is that how do we allow employees to feel that they can do this and it's spoken publicly? Because it's not only, because you remember if you said at the beginning of what I was talking about, we've got the data that we know individuals are experimenting themselves, but it actually necessarily that conversation isn't coming to the forefront of in organisations and with line managers that are higher up the chain of actually this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm learning. So there's this risk individually of actually, what if I get found out? What does that mean to me? Is my job safe in the future? Am I going to be replaced? And this goes back to the economist perspective about where human behaviour is starting to get in the way with these middle managers because they're not sure what it means for them. So you can see kind of the train of thought that we're having to think about here with humans. Under the other brackets that we've identified here, sorry, Andrew, if you just jump back on there, is specifically the other one I just wanted to talk about is ethical risks. So I've touched it slightly with regards to human behaviour, but the one specific area I want to talk about is the element of transparency. And this then links across to organisational as well. How do we make this transparent from an ethical perspective? And we raise the conversation. And again, this goes back to my previous slide about how do we create these cultures of collaborative environments to allow us to do this. So moving on, here's some strategies just to give you some thoughts to think about. How do we take away this fear, potentially, this fixed mindset, fear of being found out, or creating psychological safety to high engagement? And what we're thinking about here is that we work with organisations and teams to really help them shape through the vision work that Cilla spoke about, crafting the story of actually how do we create these cross-functional AI task force, let's call them that. So they could be like your innovators within your organisation to help really drive this strategy forward at a middle manager level that supports the ambition that's been spoken about on the board table, specifically like using some of the examples Cilla spoke about from a financial perspective, actually recognizing what the future state of the organization looks like, but how are we going to get our middle managers to lead and understand how to do this? And this is where we bring joint problem solving workshops together to really bring this together approach. That's more the strategic element, but then there is the element of, have I got the skills and the capabilities within my organization to really understand how to do that? So we take these kind of two frameworks together and we work with organizations to help them develop the skills that are needed. So it could be that, how do we develop from a fixed to a growth mindset? What do we have to do with individuals to develop their self-awareness in that area? And this is can be classed to be quite personalized. So this is when we can use AI to help develop the content to do this, whether it's through joint learning or online learning platforms. And then we start to bring all these different learnings together through this collaborative environment and workshop to celebrate the wins and progress. And the point that, and Andrew uses the word earlier, that we really need to kind of maximize the human behavior that we've already got. We're going to augment it. And the point here is that I really think this is about how we use AI not to replace the wonderful people that we've got in our organization. It amplifies our human potential across multi-generation, 4 generations in the workforce. You know, if I look at my teenage daughter who's learned this, this is how they operate compared to some of the board level individuals we work who are learning in a different way, just because of the generation they are. So thank you ever so much. That just gives you a bit of an insight of some of the current thinking from a human potential and what we need to think about for our leaders, both at our more junior middle management levels through to the boardroom.
Thank you very much, Charlotte.